In this video, I'm going to tell you the biggest mistake I have made in my poker career. I've been playing poker for 10 years and I've been playing poker professionally for most of those 10 years. And when I say the biggest mistake in poker, people usually think playing tight is a mistake or playing too loose is a mistake. They think maybe I've made a bad fold or made a bad call or I did not do proper blank roll management. I did not put a stop loss. Like these are the kind of mistakes that people think I'm referring to. Or they think maybe I played, too aggressively or whatever else. People think that the poker mistakes that impact you the greatest are the mistakes that you make on the poker table. This is a mistake. This is a fallacy. The biggest poker mistakes that you will ever make will be made off the poker table. Those are the ones that dictate what you're going to get out of poker. Those mistakes are the ones that determine basically your poker destiny. So one of the biggest mistakes that people can make is playing in the wrong game. That decision was made off the poker table. But my poker mistake, the biggest poker mistake that I made is not investing in Bitcoin. And why is it a poker mistake? Because I actually had the option of taking my winnings from poker in Bitcoin. A lot of the poker players have actually gotten rich not through poker, but because they took their winnings in forms of crypto, Bitcoin or other cryptos. And poker is kind of like a gray area industry. So in some countries it's illegal, in some countries it's legal, but in most countries there is no regulation defining whether poker is legal or not legal. So to avoid any kind of risk, to avoid any kind of regulatory risk or any kind of risk when it comes to the authorities, a lot of poker players chose to take their winnings in terms of Bitcoin. And then they kept that Bitcoin and saved in it. And that was accidentally one of the best decisions a lot of the poker players made. A lot of the poker players didn't get rich playing poker. They got rich because they took whatever money they won and saved it in Bitcoin. And if you have not been living under a rock, you probably know that Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the past decade. Bitcoin is an online currency that was developed in 2008, 2009, when the big financial crisis happened in the United States and then all over the world. You could feel the effects of banks crashing and the economy kind of took a big tumble in 2008. And I'm not going to get into the details of how that happened, but basically it was a bunch of big banks taking speculative bets on the housing markets and offering mortgages to people who couldn't afford to pay the mortgage and just making irresponsible decisions. And then what happened was the government came in, printed a bunch of money, took your taxpayer money and bailed out those banks and gave them a handout. They were like, it's okay, you made this mistake, that's fine. We're going to help you out, don't worry. You can make whatever irresponsible, illegal decisions, but you are too big to fail, so we're going to help you out. But that negatively impacted every single person living in America and also in the world, because it was, money cannot just be printed out of thin air. It was their money. It was the people's money. And so if you print more money, what you're doing is, let's say I have $100 in my pocket. Now the value of my $100 has gone down because you just put in more dollars in circulation. So if a potato cost $1 yesterday, today it costs more than $1 because there's more dollars to go around. It's just supply and demand. So this is what the government did in 2008. So a bunch of programmers wanted to come up with a solution for a problem that we've had since the beginning of civilization. And that problem is that we never had sound money. What do I mean by sound money? Sound money is money whose value cannot be eroded. Sound money is money that retains its value over space and time, which means if today $1 buys one potato, in 1,000 years, $1 is still able to buy one potato. But that is not the case. The cost of potatoes has been going up. And it's not just the cost of potatoes, it's cost of houses, it's cost of cars, it's cost of fuel, it's cost of everything basically that's going up in terms of dollars, because dollars is not sound money. The US dollar is bad money because it does not retain its value over space and time, over a long period of time, and over when you take it from one place to another. The value keeps fluctuating, it keeps on changing. And so, what is the solution? The solution was to create a currency that cannot be inflated, to create a currency whose supply is fixed. And so, the number one rule that the Bitcoin developers came up with is that Bitcoin supply is capped at 21 million, which means there can never be 21 million and one Bitcoin. And that is part of the code. That code has been tested by the best hackers in the world, and they've had an incentive of almost $1 trillion to hack that code and change the code. Because if you can hack the code, then you can take all of the Bitcoin, and all of the Bitcoin in the world is more than $1 trillion today. So they've had that incentive for the past 15 years since Bitcoin was first invented, but nobody has been able to hack in that system. And so that brings us to the second property of this sound money, which is not just that it's fixed in supply, but it's also unhackable. It's unchangeable. It's immutable. And this is a property of money which has not existed since the beginning of time. And why is that? Because if you have dollars in your bank account can be hacked and dollars can be taken out. People have hacked into other forms of money, systems, networks of other forms of money, and taken that money out. And so your money is not very safe if you keep it somewhere else. If you keep it in gold, for example, at your house, robbers can come into your house, point a gun at your head, and take the gold. If you don't tell them where the gold is, they can shoot you, they can look for the gold, and they can find it and then can take it. Bitcoin is not like that. Bitcoin is internet money, which means it doesn't exist physically in a location. It is in the cloud, which means it's in the ether. It's in the network of computers that form the Bitcoin network. And these computers, their only job is to protect Bitcoin. These are the most powerful computers in the world, and they've also formed the most powerful, unhackable network in the world. So that's why Bitcoin is great. And the mistake that I made was not taking money in Bitcoin. The wins that I had in my poker sessions, if I had just taken that into Bitcoin, I would be worth $100 million today. And that is a mistake that I will have to regret and live with for the rest of my life. I got into Bitcoin, but I got into Bitcoin very late, very, very late. And I wish I could go back in time. I could invent a time machine and I could just tell myself that, you idiot, just take the money in Bitcoin. They're offering it to you in Bitcoin, just take it. Like, what is the worst that could happen? It could just go to zero and it's fine because it's just a little bit of money. You could always make more money. And what people don't understand is they think Bitcoin is a scam, but that's because they have not studied Bitcoin. I've probably studied 500 hours of Bitcoin and I still don't understand it completely, but I have an understanding of Bitcoin at a level where I can confidently put 100% of my wealth, of my personal assets into Bitcoin. And the reason is because Bitcoin is perfect money. So we've had this problem of money from the beginning, but let me explain to you why this problem exists in terms that you could understand. Before I explain the problem of Bitcoin, you have to kind of look at what is money in the first place. Money is energy. You go to work and you have energy in your body and in your brain that you got from eating food, and then you work hard and you convert and transform that energy into something valuable for society. So for example, if you're a farmer, I don't know if there are any farmers watching this video, but if you're a farmer and you go to your farm and you go to the land and you till the land and then you sow the seeds and you water the seeds and then you keep the weeds away and then the crop grows and finally it's time to harvest, you harvest, then you go to the market and you sell it. So you put in a lot of energy, and then when you sold the final product, the final potatoes, you get some money. That's just you exchanging your energy for other people's energy. So money is just a token that represents everybody's energy in the world. And now, if the government is just allowed to print more money without having done any work whatsoever, you are corrupting the reservoir of energy in the world. You're corrupting it with fake money that was not created because of some form of energy that transferred into money. And the law of conservation of energy in physics says that energy can neither be created nor be destroyed, it can only be transformed. So when you're creating energy, money from out of thin air, from a printer in the sky, which is what the Federal Reserve in the United States does, you are corrupting the entire economy. And this is why half of the problems in the world exist because of this. Because people are not able to retain the value of their energy, they make more short-term decisions. They don't think about the future. They don't want to save for the future. They want to spend it now because that money is worthless in the future. Because in 10 years, God knows how much money the Federal Reserve is going to print. Let me just give you a statistic. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has printed more money than they printed from their inception in 1930 till 2008. Trillions and trillions of dollars. During the 4 years of Trump presidency, the Federal Reserve printed almost $16 trillion. And that's just a crazy fucking number. Because people are not working hard in the economy to actually produce that much energy. And this is why we needed money that cannot be corrupted by outside influence. Since the beginning of time, we've used different kinds of money. We've used glass beads in Africa, or we've used seashells in the Pacific Islands. We used bales of tobacco in America. The Native Americans used bales of tobacco as form of currency. So we've used different kinds of things as forms of currency. Precious stones, precious gems. And all of those kinds of currency were bad because as soon as somebody figured out that the supply of this currency is not fixed, they went to the next island, they got a bunch of seashells, and then they bought the entire island. So everybody in that island who had worked hard and saved their energy in form of the currency of that seashell, they lost their assets. They lost their value that they were holding and saving for their future. So people's lives were destroyed. The same thing happened in ancient Rome. The reason why the Roman Empire was one of the greatest empires in history and expanded to such a large territory and people were prosperous and lived amazing lives was because Rome, the currency was gold coin, the Roman coin. It was made entirely of gold. And gold is the second best form of currency after Bitcoin. And the reason is because it is not easy to mine gold. It is not easy to inflate the supply of gold to such a large extent that everybody who's holding gold, the value of that gold diminishes. In fact, the value of gold has only gone up over time. And the reason is because it is very, very, very difficult to mine gold. And any amount of improvement in technology, in digging equipment, in ability to map gold mines has not given a proportionate result in the ability to find gold. Finding gold out of the earth is really hard. It's a costly exercise. So it's basically proof of work. So the amount of work that you put in, the amount of energy that you spend getting gold is very equally correlated to the price of gold. And you cannot inflate the supply of gold by a crazy number. Every year, the supply of gold increases by 2%. And so if there's 100 kilos of gold in circulation today in the world, next year it's only going to be 102 kilos. And because the demand keeps going up to match the supply, the price of gold remains stable. and the value of gold remains stable. So the supply and demand have to go in hand. And that's why gold has been able to retain a stable, its status as a stable currency. But the problem with gold is that gold is physical. So it's not easy to move gold from one place to another. It's not easily movable. Like people in Ukraine who are under the regime of the war, they cannot just move their gold from Ukraine to another place. They have to give up their gold and then move to another place. You cannot carry large quantities of gold and all of your wealth. If you're a billionaire, you cannot carry your wealth in gold to somewhere. And that's why it's easily confiscatable. Bitcoin is not confiscatable because Bitcoin is anonymous. If you acquired and bought Bitcoin anonymously and you never declared your identity, you didn't do your KYC and bought it from a centralized exchange, then nobody knows you are the person who has Bitcoin. And so the government doesn't even know that you have Bitcoin. How are they ever going to confiscate it? And this is the beauty of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not only fixed in supply, it's also immutable and non-hackable, but it's also anonymous. So which means that you cannot just take someone's Bitcoin because you don't know that person has it. Like none of the people watching know if I have Bitcoin or not. And I don't, I lost my Bitcoin in a boating accident. And so in ancient Rome, they had a gold coin. And because the currency was so stable, it was gold. It was not very easy to produce very high quantities of gold. The Roman civilization prospered. But eventually what happened was that the people who ruled Rome decided to go on extravagant wars. They started, trying to capture more and more territory. And that wars require money. They require energy. So people started spending more and more money on the war. The Roman emperors started spending more and more money on wars. And eventually they ran out of money. So what they did was they confiscated everybody's gold coins. And in exchange, they gave them a coin that was half gold and half silver. Now silver is easier to mine than gold, which is why it is not as valuable as gold. And so what they did was they devalued the currency. They told everybody to put in, like they basically said the gold coin is no longer legal currency. So you have to turn in your gold coin and we will take all of the gold coin and we will give you back the coin that is now legal currency, which was half gold and half silver. So now because they added 50% silver and 50% gold, they had a lot more money to spend on the wars. They basically took half of the wealth of the public and they confiscated it and then they spent it on wars and they gave everybody the half gold, half silver coin. And then they repeated this process again when they ran out of that money. They took the half gold, half silver coin, they took out all the gold, they made the coin 100% silver. So now the currency was devalued by 50%. And then they gave back everyone the silver coins and spent all the gold on the wars. And they kept doing this and they ran out of all the money again. So they confiscated the silver coins this time and then they converted the silver coins into copper coins and then copper coins into bronze coins and then bronze coins into brass coins and then brass coins into tin coins and then tin coins into lead coins. So they kept devaluing the currency of the people until the Roman civilization collapsed. And the reason why it collapsed is because people no longer believed in the money. They no longer believed that if they worked hard at something, they would be able to save for the future. So most people started making short-term decisions. And this is how every single civilization has collapsed in the past. Because we did not have sound money. We did not have money that retained its value over space and time. And this is exactly what is happening today to the US dollar. The US dollar was once on the gold standard, which means the government could only print as much USD as they had gold in the reserves. But once they started going on wars, like the World War I and World War II, after World War I, they realized that they needed more money, so they went off the gold standard, they made the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve was given the capacity to print as much money as they wanted, and they said it doesn't matter how much gold we have in the reserves, we can print more money because the US is cannot go get bankrupt. The US actually has the largest military, and the US is the winner of the war, so we will never go bankrupt. So you don't have to worry. We can just keep printing money, and we are always good for the money, which is such an empty promise. So what they are doing is they are taking the value of the hard work of the American people and devaluing that their own currency, so that the cost of goods keeps going up. More and more people start falling in poverty. And as you keep printing money, what you're eventually doing is you have exhausted all of the value that you could suck out from the current generation, and now you're borrowing the value from the future generations because you're accruing debt. So you're taking on debt and you're printing more money to pay off that debt. And because you have the ability to print your own money and pay off your own debt, it's basically a Ponzi scheme. So eventually it is bound to fail. It's just a matter of when, and it's just a matter of how. But eventually the debt is going to go to a level where they cannot even afford to pay the interest. And currently the US national debt stands at about $36 trillion. So they basically owe the world and the future generations $36 trillion. And they have printed so much money that the US dollar has lost 99.9% of its purchasing value over 100 years since the inception of the Federal Reserve. And this is exactly why Bitcoin was created, because Bitcoin is the solution to all of these problems. Because you cannot create more than 21 million Bitcoin, the supply of Bitcoin is fixed. You cannot confiscate Bitcoin. You cannot take someone else's Bitcoin and then devalue that currency, which is what people did in ancient Rome when they confiscated the gold coin and gave them back, a lower quality coin. You cannot confiscate Bitcoin, and you cannot hack into the network. You cannot break the network. Even if you took all of the computational power in the world, it would take you millennia to be able to hack into the Bitcoin network. And the Bitcoin network is only getting stronger and stronger over time. That is why Bitcoin is the #1 currency in the world. And a lot of poker players got rich off of Bitcoin because they took their winnings in Bitcoin. And if I had just done that, then I would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars today. But the value of Bitcoin is always going to just keep going up with respect to the dollars. And the reason is because Bitcoin's supply is fixed, but the supply of the US dollar keeps going up. The government keeps printing more dollars. They cannot print more Bitcoin. So the value of Bitcoin with respect to the dollar keeps going up. Bitcoin was worth $1 in 2013, and today it's worth $100,000. That graph's just going to keep going up. So, a lot of people who realized this earlier and saved in Bitcoin and did not sell are worth billions of dollars today, millions of dollars today, and their net worth is just going to keep going up in terms of what they can actually purchase in the world. So if you watch this video, I hope it at least inspired you to find out more about Bitcoin. And I know there's a lot to cover. I cannot cover everything in like a 30-minute video. But if it sparked your curiosity, and if you have any questions about Bitcoin, feel free to ask me in the comments, because I have actually studied a lot of material and resources on Bitcoin. One recommendation that I would give you is to read this book called The Bitcoin Standard. It explains how we went away from the classical model of economics, which was based on supply and demand, and we came up with this modern Keynesian economics where the government can print just however much money it wants, but it won't negatively impact the economy. So the whole economy is based on that lie, and how Bitcoin is the solution. What is money? What are the properties of money? What is why is Bitcoin immutable? Why is Bitcoin scarce? Why is Bitcoin decentralized and anonymous? Why is it that the supply of Bitcoin is fixed? All of these things you can study in this one book called The Bitcoin Standard, and it's going to, I promise you, change your life. So What you have to understand that money has to be decentralized, which means if one authority has all of the power to dictate what happens to the supply of the money, then that money is not sound money. Because power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So whenever a small number of people have all of the power, they use it to basically further their own interests. That's just the nature of power. If I had all of the power to dictate what happens to the US dollar, I would probably also use it to then get an advantage for myself. And I would inflate the currency. And that's exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing. And by the way, the Federal Reserve is not even an elected body. It's not even a body that, that people elect. It's a private organization, which is crazy to think that a private organization has that much power, which is exactly why we need to abolish the Federal Reserve. And what people don't understand is that anytime any system is centralized, it is bound to fail. This is exactly why democracy won over dictatorship. Because in a dictatorship, one person has all of the decision-making power. So he's obviously going to use that power to enrich himself and not care about the people. And a democracy is a decentralized system. A dictatorship is a centralized system. So in a democracy, the power is distributed to all kinds of people, to the individual, where the individual has a say, a vote in what happens in the process of them being governed. It's not a perfect system because there's still ways to centralize power in a democracy, but it's better than dictatorship. This is exactly why capitalism is better than communism, because in communism, the government owns the means of production. The state owns the means of production, which means it has the sole power to dictate what industries can be formed and who will work for who, and there is no motive for any kind of profit. And so power is centralized in communism. But in capitalism, anybody can start a business. Anybody can employ anybody. The government, the state, does not own the means of production. It merely regulates it. And so the free market decides who wins. You can decide with the value of your money, your dollar, who wins. And that's why capitalism works better than communism in terms of raising people out of poverty. In fact, communism is one of the worst economic systems because communist countries like Russia and China led to millions and millions of deaths in the 20th century. So whenever a system is decentralized, it's more efficient than when a system is centralized. This is exactly why Bitcoin is decentralized and it is a more efficient system than the US dollar, which is centralized. In the US dollar, the Federal Reserve makes the decision of how many US dollars are there in circulation. In Bitcoin, if you have to change the supply of Bitcoin, you will have to get consensus from everybody who's running the Bitcoin node on their computer. And this, at this point, is tens of thousands of computers. And so if everybody doesn't agree, you cannot make changes to the Bitcoin code. And that's why Bitcoin code is secure. It's safe because people who own Bitcoin will never agree to changing the supply of Bitcoin. That would mean that Bitcoin becomes overnight worthless. If Bitcoin goes from 21 million to 22 million in supply, the Bitcoin would overnight become worthless because that is the real draw to Bitcoin. The people know that the supply is fixed, so they can trust their energy there. Bitcoin is a system that conserves your energy. It follows the law of physics of the conservation of energy. US dollar is a system where your energy is dissipated and being stolen away by a few people at the top who control the Federal Reserve. And that is exactly why the biggest mistake that I made in my poker career was not to invest in Bitcoin. And I hope if you're listening to this video and you are making money from poker, you are not going to make the same mistake. You are also going to invest in Bitcoin with everything that you earn from poker. Because if you just do that, you will outperform 99.9% of winning poker players, which is already less than 1% of all poker players. You don't even have to be a great poker player. If you just invest in Bitcoin, you're going to have more money. You're going to conserve your energy better than anybody else. You're actually going to create generational wealth. So I hope you like this video. I know this was a long one and I went on a lot of tangents and rants. If you have any questions, I'm really passionate about this topic. I would recommend reading the Bitcoin Standard and listening to a guy named Michael Saylor. That's Michael, Saylor, Michael Saylor. Just type his name in YouTube and you're gonna get really great videos about that. So, I hope you like the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then leave a comment and let me know what you thought about the video. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.